been interesting times. Today's stories. New clashes erupt as embattled Chile president reshuffles his cabinet. Iraqis in Basra take part in anti-government protests. In Morocco, members of a dismantled terrorist cell are suspected of targeting sensitive sites. Workers and strikers clash amid Bolivia post-election unrest. The Pentagon says Baghdadi remains treated, quote, appropriately. An LA firefighter says California wildfires is, quote, the new normal. An Israeli envoy calls on the UN to take action against the Turkish military assault. Plus, Shatter the Silence, Domestic Violence Awareness Walk brings together Maryland communities. This is Eagle News, coming to you from New York, bringing you stories from around the globe. And I am Jennifer Polentan. Chilean protesters clashed with several security forces on Monday, several hours after embattled President Sebastián Piñera announced a cabinet reshuffle in his latest bid to end 10 days of street demonstrations. At least 20 people have died in a wave of protests against social and economic inequality ahead of the latest violence in Santiago and, according to local media, the cities in Valparaiso and Concepcion. Piñera, who placed a third of his cabinet, including highly unpopular Interior Minister Andrés Chadwick, said, quote, Chile has changed and the government, too, has to change to confront these new challenges in these new times. Protesters have been demanding Piñera's resignation as anger over low wages and pensions, expensive health and education, and a growing gap between rich and poor fueled the country's worst civil unrest in decades. Clashes between protesters and police later took place in central Santiago, not far from the presidential palace, as a peaceful rally of several thousand people gradually gave way to violence. Some shops were looted, and a fire tore through a building housing a shopping center, several shops and a hotel, recalling the violence that erupted in the early days of the protests that broke out on October 18th. A mining union said in a statement, workers at Escondida, the world's biggest copper mine, will start a 24-hour strike from Tuesday in support of the protests. A week-long state of emergency that had seen 20,000 police and soldiers deployed on the streets ended at midnight going into Monday. On Saturday, Piñera canceled nighttime curfews that had begun a day after violent protests broke out. Finance Minister Felipe Larraín, who was among the axed cabinet members, came under fire last month for recommending that romantics buy flowers after announcing that inflation had not risen and they were even cheaper. Also on the way out was Economy Minister Andrés Fontaine, who fell afoul of public opinion when he advised disgruntled workers to get up earlier to avoid an increase in peak hour metro prices. The 3% rise was the spark that triggered the worst political violence Chile has seen since it returned to democracy after the Augusto Pinochet dictatorship from 1973 to 1990. Former Santiago Governor Carla Rubilar, who was praised for her sympathetic reaction to protesters, has been made minister for the General Secretariat of the government. Piñera announced plans for the cabinet overhaul on Saturday, his third reshuffle in 15 months. Last week, he offered a raft of measures aimed at calming the public ire, including a hike in the minimum wage and pensions, some reductions in healthcare costs, and a streamlining of parliament. Speaking at the presidential palace on Monday, Piñera said, quote, these measures won't solve all our problems, but they are an important first step. They reflect the firm will of our government and the strong commitment of each of us in favor of a socially more just and equitable Chile. Despite his attempts to appease the masses, Piñera's approval rating has dropped to 14%. Meanwhile, Iraqis in the oil-rich port of Basra take part in anti-government protests facing members of security forces holding their weapons wrapped in national flags, while the army announced it would impose an overnight curfew in the capital after students and school children joined spreading protests to demand an overhaul of the government.
بإسقاط النظام لا الدولة إسقاط النظام معناه تغيير الشخوص التي أتت منذ 2003 وثبتوا فشلهم. هذا هو إسقاط النظام بتغيير الشخوص وليس الدولة.
ظلينا بعد ما نحلم ولا نفكر، حايرين بس بعيشتنا. ليش هيك؟ هو هذا العراق بلد الخير، بلد العز، بلد الكرامة.
Swaths of Iraq have been engulfed by demonstrations over unemployment and corruption this month that have evolved into demands for regime change. The rallies have gathered despite temporary curfews, threats of arrest, and violence that has left nearly 240 people dead, including 5 protesters killed in Baghdad on Monday. The military said cars and foot traffic would be barred in the capital for 6 hours, starting at midnight. The move sparked concern that security forces want to clear out main gathering places like the capital's Tahrir Square, but protesters flocked to the square in the hours ahead of the curfew start. 3-wheeled vehicles, known as tuk-tuks, ferried people to Tahrir, and a cacophony of car horns from accumulating traffic could be heard from surrounding neighborhoods. Demonstrators have occupied the square for 4 consecutive nights, clinging on despite heavy tear gas, used to keep protesters from storming the Green Zone, which hosts government offices and foreign offices. They had otherwise been allowed to set up tents in Tahrir and taken over multi-story buildings there since Thursday, in a marked departure from the response during the first week of this month. They were joined in the previous 24 hours by a huge contingent of students who joined despite stern warnings by the Higher Education Minister and the Prime Minister's office that they should stay away. Other student protests gathered in the southern cities of Nasiriyah, Hilal, and Basra, and even the holy city of Najaf. The National Teachers Syndicate announced a 4-day strike, and the Lawyers Union also told its members to boycott the courts for several days. A police spokesman said 7 Moroccans suspected of planning large-scale terrorist acts in the name of the Islamic State group were arrested on Friday. The Interior Ministry said in a statement the suspects, quote, plan to carry out a series of terrorist operations targeting sensitive infrastructure and strategic sites in coordination with foreign elements. The statement added the alleged leader of the cell was, quote, in contact with an explosives expert active within the ranks of Islamic State. The arrests were carried out by special forces of the Central Bureau of Judicial Investigation in several areas, Tamaris and the southern suburbs of Casablanca, as well as in Chefchaouen and Ouzazain in the country's north. Weapons, munitions, a dinghy, diving equipment, balaclavas, bags containing chemical products, and a pledge of allegiance to Islamic State were found at the suspected ringleader's home in Tamaris. The search of a house rented by another suspect in Ouzazain uncovered weapons, camping gear, and mountain climbing equipment. The ministry said the group is thought to have been planning to set up a rear base in the mountainous areas of the region. The Interior Ministry said the suspects are in custody and investigations are ongoing to arrest possible accomplices. In July, 3 Moroccan men were sentenced to death, a penalty not applied in Morocco since 1993, for the murder of 2 Scandinavian tourists in the name of Islamic State in December in the High Atlas Mountains. The men belonged to a radicalized group that had been meeting for several years in Marrakesh, undetected. Sentences were handed down for 21 other accused members of the group, ranging from 5 years to life in prison. Their appeal is expected to conclude next week. Until last year, Morocco had been spared recent violence linked to jihadist groups. Previously, the country had been hit by an attack in Casablanca in 2003 that killed 33 and another in Marrakesh in 2011 that left 17 dead.
كانت معلومة توصل بها المكتب المركزي للأبحاث القضائية مؤخرا على كون واحد الخلية إرهابية تكون واحد 7 ديال الأشخاص ينحدرون من واحد الضاحية ديال الدار البيضاء، وعلى أنهم وصلوا واحد المستوى متقدم في التهيئ لتنفيذ مشاريع إرهابية كانت ستشكل في الحقيقة خطر على الاقتصاد ديال المملكة المغربية ولكن كانوا سيستهدفون المشاريع ديالهم داخل الدار البيضاء والهروب الى هذيك الغرفه الامنه اللي كانت في وزان، مع مشروع اخر لاعداد واحد المعسكر. وكانوا مشاو زاروا عده مرات معسكر في جبالي في المنطقه ديال بريشه. الابحاث ديالنا مازال مستمره من اجل الوصول الى هويه الشخص اللي جاء من عند داعش واللي جاب لهم الاسلحه واللي دخلت عن طريق الساحل واللي مدهم بالمبالغ الماليه، والاشخاص اللي معه، لانه من خلال الاستجواب ديالهم تبين على انه ماشي بوحده، على انه كان لقاء معهم في وزان، ما جاش بوحده، جاو معه اشخاص اخرين، واحد جوج اخرين. فاذا نحن على طول السنه نقوم بتفكيك خلايا ارهابيه كتنشط، كتكون عندها مشاريع وهذا في اطار السباق ديالنا كنقبطوها. حاليا راه حنا وصلنا 13 خليه، هذه 13، ولكن هذه تتميز على الخلايا الاخرى بكونها وصلت لواحد المستوى على انها ماشي غتقوم غير بالعمليات الارهابيه داخل يعني في الارض داخل المدينه، ولكن حتى في المناطق البحريه ديالنا.
In other news, Bolivian police used tear gas to separate pro-government workers and opposition strikers at roadblocks in the commercial capital Santa Cruz amid a sixth day of strikes against the disputed re-election of President Evo Morales.
Hay cuestionamientos serios, pero cuestionamientos que no se basan y no se están sustentando en pruebas serias, se están sustentando en comentarios de las redes sociales.
Porque en el voto 2019 que se ha votado ha ganado nuestro presidente Evo Morales Ayma. Ellos es los que no quieren eso. Es por eso este bloqueo.
Porque no nos conviene, se nos están haciendo la burla. ¿Cómo puede ser alguien que está comiendo tranquilo y decir que nosotros no somos nadie? Si esto no es el pueblo, ¿qué es el pueblo entonces? Pues nosotros lo pusimos, nosotros lo sacamos, señores.
Masistas, porque ellos se camuflan siempre, dice queremos trabajar, mentira, son todos masistas son. Nosotros ya han venido a querer provocarnos, más bien la policía, provocaron un rato, tiraron piedra y más bien la policía se metió y ya puso el orden.
Street battles broke out on Monday between supporters of President Evo Morales and opposition leader Carlos Mesa as protests against alleged electoral fraud in Bolivia entered a second week. Residents of the Achumani neighborhood in southern La Paz used branches, rubble, and rope to close roads and block access to public transport, with some bus drivers trying to remove the barricades. Fistfights broke out between rival groups, which then degenerated into battles with sticks and stones as police used tear gas to try to disperse them. Regime and opposition figures blamed each other for the violence. Demonstrations have raged since presidential elections on October 20th that saw Morales gain an unconstitutional fourth term amid allegations of irregularities in the vote count. Mesa, who accused the government of fraud, has urged his supporters to keep up the pressure with strikes backed up by street protests. Mesa wrote on his Facebook page, quote, "The government is entirely responsible for the violent actions." Vice President Alvaro Garcia Linera blamed Mesa for the clashes, calling him, quote, "angry, liar, and deceitful." Garcia Linera said, quote, "He is responsible, he is guilty." La Paz Mayor Luis Revilla, a Mesa ally, told reporters the opposition strike was peaceful, but said pro-Morales shock groups were provoking confrontations around the country. In the central city of Cochabamba, clashes broke out between opposition supporters, setting up barricades and regime loyalists trying to break them up. No injuries were reported in either La Paz or Cochabamba. La Paz's business district, where government offices are located, was relatively calm, but there were roadblocks in many other neighborhoods. A general strike paralyzed Santa Cruz in the east and the mining city of Potosi in the southeast. On Sunday, Morales claimed the opposition was preparing for a coup d'etat. Up next, the Pentagon says Baghdadi remains treated, quote, "appropriately." An LA firefighter says California wildfires is, quote, "the new normal." An Israeli envoy calls on the UN to take action against Turkish military assault. Plus, Shatter the Silence, Domestic Violence Awareness Walk brings together Maryland communities. Eagle News will be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is Eagle News coming to you from New York, and I'm Jennifer Polentan. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, said the remains of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi were transported to a secure facility to confirm his identity with forensic DNA testing. Milley said the disposal of his remains were handled appropriately. The jihadist leader was reportedly buried at sea. Milley and Defense Secretary Mark Esper were speaking at a briefing at the Pentagon.
As President Trump announced yesterday, United States Joint Special Operations Forces conducted a successful raid on Saturday night, resulting in the death of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. There is no guarantee of success in an operation with this level of difficulty, and President Trump knew this when he made the bold decision to order the raid, confident in the expertise of our forces. Despite Baghdadi's death, the security situation in Syria remains complex. Multiple state and non-state actors continue to vie for control of territory and resources within the country. Additionally, the United States will retain control of oil fields in northeast Syria. At the height of Baghdadi's reign, these oil fields provided ISIS with the bulk of financial resources used to fund its terror. U.S. troops will remain positioned in this strategic area to deny ISIS access to those vital resources.
While clearing the objective, U.S. forces discovered al-Baghdadi hiding in a tunnel. The assault force closed in on Baghdadi and ended when he detonated a suicide vest. Baghdadi's remains were then transported to a secure facility to confirm his identity with forensic DNA testing. And the disposal of his remains has been done and is complete and was handled appropriately. Well, we do have video, photos. We're not prepared at this time to release those. They're going through a declassification process. I think what you'll see here in the coming days is we'll set up some operational and tactical level briefings by Central Command, and you'll be provided some video and photos, et cetera, of that.
Wildfires raged across California on Friday, destroying homes and forcing evacuations as over 1,000 firefighters tackled flames in the southern part of the state alone. At least 4 other fires have erupted in Southern California this week, fueled by high temperatures in the 80s and 90s and bone-dry conditions. The National Weather Service warned that although wind speeds were set to decrease later Friday, they were expected to pick up again on Sunday and Monday in the southern part of the state. A number of wildfires are also raging in the northern part of the state. The most serious, the Kincaid Fire, broke out late Wednesday in the Sonoma wine region, also prompting evacuations. The high risk of fires has led to preemptive power cuts to thousands of customers and prompted Governor Gavin Newsom to declare a state of emergency in Sonoma and Los Angeles counties. Newsom traveled to Sonoma on Friday to survey areas impacted by the Kincaid Fire, which has grown to around 23,700 acres and was only 5% contained as of Friday evening. The blaze, which is burning in remote, steep terrain, has destroyed nearly 50 structures and forced the evacuation of the entire community of Geyserville and nearby vineyards. Newsom told reporters the area looked like a war zone, with homes and vehicles destroyed. Residents said they barely had time to gather their belongings as the ferocious fire approached their homes. The state's largest utility, Pacific Gas and Electric Company, warned that millions of people in northern and central parts of the state could have their power cut off during the weekend given the high risk of fire. The company has come under intense scrutiny after it reported Thursday that even though power to nearly 28,000 customers in Sonoma County had been shut down on Wednesday, some of the high-voltage transmission lines were still operating when the fire broke out. The same type of equipment was responsible for the state's deadliest wildfire ever, the Camp Fire in 2018, which killed 86 people. PG&E, which filed for bankruptcy earlier this year, has been blamed for several other fires in the state in recent years. Newsom hit out at the company on Friday, saying it had put profits over people of California for too long. The governor said it was infuriating beyond words that a state as innovative as California has to see these types of blackouts, adding that the frequency of fires could not only be blamed on climate change. Intense fires also erupted over the border of Mexico's Baja California state, where local civil protection authorities said on Friday that 3 people had been killed and over 150 homes destroyed. The director of civil protection, Antonio Rosquilas, explained that the municipality of Tecate, bordering the United States, was worst hit. Israel's ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, called on the international community to take action against Turkey's military assault on the Kurdish people, saying Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is, quote, a threat to regional stability, to Turkey's neighbors, and to the Turkish democracy. The United Nations Security Council holds a meeting on the situation in the Middle East as Turkey is accused of undermining the fight against the remnants of Islamic State with its offensive against the Syrian Kurdish YPG militia, launched on October 9.
We stand with our Kurdish allies in their struggle against Erdogan's military assault. Once a quarter, we gather here to discuss the situation in the Middle East. Usually they will focus only on Israel. This time it is clear that we should focus on Erdogan. It should be the focus of the debate today. For years, he has been destabilizing the region through violence and supporting terror organizations. Now his actions directly threaten the Kurdish people, including innocent civilians. Erdogan is a threat to regional stability, to Turkey's neighbors, and to the Turkish democracy. First, we want to congratulate the United States President, the administration, the troops that took part in this bold decision, this bold operation. This is the way to treat terrorists, and every leader of terror organization around the world should look at what happened to Mr. Baghdadi. So we are not in a position to give grades to the President or to the policy of the United States. However, our policy regarding the Kurds is clear. When we see the pictures, we say we cannot sit idly by, we cannot be quiet. That's why we speak about that. And when we see Erdogan continuing with his aggression, with terrorizing the life of the Kurds, he has been doing it in Turkey, but now he's moving into Syria, we cannot be quiet, and we call the international community to take action on that.
In Maryland, a group of law enforcers organized a domestic violence awareness walk dubbed Shatter the Silence, bringing together families, friends, and communities. Eagle News correspondent Eliza Gonzalez-Maglicmot reports.
For several years now, every October, a group of law enforcers in Maryland gathers members of the community for an awareness walk to battle domestic violence. Dubbed Shatter the Silence, this annual walk reaches out to victims of violence at home by letting them know help is available to them. All they need to do is to come forward and speak up.
Domestic violence touches everyone's lives. It doesn't discriminate. Age, gender, nationality, socioeconomic status, it doesn't matter. Domestic violence and sexual assault is an epidemic in our community, and we have to stop it. So, as a part of law enforcement, in a non-enforcement capacity, we felt that it was important to show our community the support that they need, and we collaborated with the hospital and churches, and as a result of that, we have a group of wonderful people coming together to show their support to survivors.
This event is very close to my heart. It's exactly what our shirt says, Shatter the Silence. With domestic violence being something that people are ashamed of and don't want to talk about, is very prevalent in our community. And we want to have a safe place here where we have resources, where you can come and you can get help. You have people here who have been directly impacted and indirectly impacted, and people who just want to be here for you and support the cause.
So Maryland is one of the higher ranking states for domestic violence for men and women, and we take it very serious.
Because a lot of people think that they have to be silent about the things that happen, not only domestic violence, but sexual assault as well. So this is to shatter the silence, to get rid of the stigmatism that people think that are attached to those two things. We want people to come forward. We want people to be safe, and that's what this is about. As law enforcement officers, as females, we want them to know that it's not a division. We want to be there to help them, and we want to be a part of everything, and we understand and we sympathize.
Is that it raises awareness. It brings awareness to all of the people who were here and all the people who are paying attention to this. And that makes them a little more interested in getting involved or being aware of things that are going on, maybe helping people out. It also helps people be aware of services that are available for them here in the county. Ours is one. We're a hospital-based sexual assault center, domestic violence center, and so we are able to provide services from the hospital, but there are other organizations as well, and so it makes people more aware of the services around them.
And when we talk about domestic violence, we're really talking about intimate partner. We're talking about relationships, children are involved, and so we're affecting multi-generations a lot of times when these occurrences occur. And I believe personally, from my perspective, it's so important now that I know, witnessed it myself, working with this wonderful organization, working with our partners, I'm now able to tell other generations, my sons who are now men who are in relationships, we can tell our children what to look for in healthy relationships.
And when we learned about this activity sponsored by the National Park Police, it encouraged us to extend help, at least raise awareness concerning this issue, because we know this is a very delicate issue, especially here in this part of the world. And at least the brethren will be aware, and it will encourage even the other members of the community to join in and at least prevent things from happening, especially for me. For example, I have my kids too. I don't want them to be victims concerned to these acts of violence. So the Church of Christ, through the approval of our beloved Executive Minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo, were allowed to join such an activity.
To shatter the silence of domestic violence, one needs to know there is support out there. Reporting from Upper Marlboro, Maryland, I am Eliza Gonzalez Manglikmot for Eagle News, 1 with 25.
Thanks, Eliza. That is today's Eagle News. Join us again tomorrow for stories that matter to you. Visit our websites at eaglenews.net and eaglenewslive.com. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/eaglenews and on Facebook at facebook.com/eaglenews. Thank you for watching. I am Jennifer Polintan, and I am 1 with 25.